Well, what's up again, guys? Brian here at 3 and welcome to another episode of People's Questions, episode 277. I'd say we got a pretty straightforward episode and series of questions, and including one somewhat disturbing question, which I'm actually quite glad someone asked this one because it kind of shows that there's a wide variety of diversity in terms of you guys' questions, which I really appreciate, even though I did find it a little bit shocking. So, starting off real simple with the first question coming from Scorpion, you want to know, which is my favorite boss theme from Metal Gear Rising? Well, I actually just talked about this game recently, but if I could pick a theme, it's definitely the final boss theme against Senator Armstrong. I mean, that is probably one of the most impressive final boss themes I've ever heard. That's actually a song I actually do have on several of my music devices, so definitely pick that one. The next question comes from Hugo Blood 881, and this is the question I was really very interested in. And you want to know, in real life, do I think the United States military... Oh, wait, sorry. In real life, how well do I think the United States military would do against Arsenal Gear in its complement of Geckos, Frog Soldiers, Metal Gear Rexes if it landed in New York like it did in Metal Gear Solid 2? Okay, well, number one, Arsenal Gear is not really much of a weapon. So, let's say it crashes in New York and its forces just start flooding out. Do I think the military force could stop it? Yes, of course. We have well over enough firepower to deal with everything that it would have. We would definitely suffer significant casualties, no doubt. But if none of those weapons, which I'm guessing, I almost forgot that it had Metal Gear Rays, if they don't have their nuclear payloads, you could take them out. For one, we would have air superiority. None of the military logistics in Arsenal Gear support any kind of air power. So that's number one. So you have to do this all on the ground. The frogs themselves could be dealt with. You have to remember that if someone like Solid Snake or Old Snake could fight his way through a large group of frog soldiers, then I think any special forces team could fight their way through a good number of them. They would definitely suffer casualties on their side, but I think that the fact that we can fire more soldiers at them, I think we would handle that. The Gecko definitely would be taken out by either tanks or our air support, without question. I think the trouble would be with the Rexes. The Rays are easier to take out than Rexes. But Rex really isn't that hard to take out if you know its weaknesses. So if you attack the Radom, then the pilot inside is blind and exposed. And with a good sniper, you could take him out while he's piloting the Metal Gear Rex. Because you can't see in every direction, so a good hidden sniper could take him out. So I think that we would probably suffer a significant amount of collateral losses, but I think our United States military could take down Arsenal Gear in its units. Next question comes from GOKU. You want to know, have I seen Resident Evil Vendetta? Yes, and I actually didn't really like it very much. I think it's actually the worst of the three Resident Evil animated movies. And I tried to do a review on this several times, but it ended up just going into like a 15 to 20 minute rant each time. So if I could just give my quick thoughts. I didn't really like the villain. I mean, they had this thing where the villain seemed like he knew what he was doing, but by the end, he was just weird. And not in that, like, oh, this guy's just disturbed. He was just a weird person. I mean, not to spoil too much, the guy wanted to take his dead wife's arm and attach it to Rebecca, and it just weird. And I honestly don't know why Leon was even in the film. I think they just had some bullshit excuse to want to get him in there and have Chris and Leon in the same film. This really could have just been about Chris. He seemed to be the main focus. They only picked up Leon because Rebecca mentioned that, oh, these, A-virus creatures, they can be controlled, just like the Las Plagas, which is, it was like that's like literally their excuse. They're trying to find Leon and getting him involved. I personally would have loved to see Chris and Jill team up again, or Chris and Claire. That would have been for a much better viewing experience than what I got. And the action at times was so over the top, it was ridiculous. Now, I know that Resident Evil is known for its ridiculousness, but in some cases, it can be a little bit grounded down. And characters were doing things that were just completely against their character. I mean, Leon was getting innocents killed. The BSA blew a few buildings up with this really cool rifle railgun. But I'm pretty sure they killed a lot of people. So it's just the fact that characters were not acting the way they should. I thought the action was a bit over the top. I thought the villain was just completely pathetic. And the story was pretty straightforward. And that's okay, that's good. But you have to make its elements work. And I don't think it did that very much. But if you enjoyed it, I'm glad, because I personally didn't. The next question comes from Matt Cruz, who wants to know, what is my favorite TV show? To be honest, I actually don't watch too much TV. I'm usually busy working on videos or watching Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or playing video games. But I guess if I could just name a TV show that I watch pretty regularly, it'd probably be South Park. Next question comes from Tanuki Player. You want to know, who is your video game artist, character or environmental? I think you mean to say, who is my favorite video game artist? I'm not really sure. I can't really think of who it is. I'd really have to really sit down and look at like several games in order to pick that out. The next question comes from JDS4696. You want to know, did I see All Eyes on Me? No, I didn't. I'm not really much of a Tupac or a Biggie fan, to be honest. Next question comes from Matthew Keller, I should say. You want to know, do you believe video games need more real martial arts? And you ask this because a YouTuber named Megatron said these game companies have millions of dollars. Why can't they put them in? He honestly hates video games. He just wants more medieval games to have more realistic and gameplay in terms of fighting styles. I don't really agree with that, because you have to remember, at the end of the day, these video games are not meant to be realistic. They're meant to be entertaining. And to be quite honest, if you've actually seen most martial artists, it's not really as impressive as, you know, movies and video games make them out to be. They can be if they're modified, but real martial arts is not very entertaining, and I'm being honest. I mean, I've seen plenty of kung fu and fighting movies, but you have to understand that that's choreographed. If it was a real fight, it would be much more random and much more short. So the whole purpose of games and movies is to entertain. If you don't do that, then you kind of fail. Next question comes from Stanley PERKSON. And I gotta say, really had to sit down and think about this question. And you want to know, since I'm kind of a history person, who is the one dictator I really couldn't stand, or put it bluntly, couldn't read, and why? One dictator that comes to mind was someone I read about while I was in college. I wanted to do research on a dictator, because when I was in college, I was studying game design, and we had to do this project where we kind of had to come up with our own story, but we had to take elements of a real, like, person from history and try to implement them in our games. And the person that I picked was President of Uganda, dictator Idi Amin. And holy shit, this dude was a fucking monster. I mean Hitler and Stalin had their issues, but I could understand where they were coming from at times. I mean, I don't know, I didn't agree with them, but dear God, this guy, just to name a few things that he would do, he would wipe out entire villages in his country. He would cut off the heads of his victims and put them in his refrigerator just to show people an example of what would happen if they defied him. He would cut his wife up and dumped her pieces out of a car in a sort of hospital. I mean, dear God, this guy was really a monster. And I basically just canceled all my research and I went to another character. But I would say that's probably the one dictator I can think off the top of my head that I just spending 3 hours just studying his character, I couldn't continue. If I recall, they actually did a movie about him, but I refused to watch it. I mean, dear God. Next question comes from Karen William, and you want to know, who could stand Psychomantis' mind powers and not kill each other in the process? XR Kun, Count Dooku, Coleman, or just kidding, Darth Vader years after Revenge of the Sith. Don't want to confuse between young and old Vader. Okay, I will say this. If Anakin went up against Psycho Mantis, he would lose. I think that Anakin's pretty much instability would work against him. I mean, he's a very fragile character at that time in terms of his psychological health. But I think anyone who had a serious discipline in controlling their emotions probably could deal with Psycho Mantis' mind powers. I mean, this is especially good for the Jedi that spend their entire life trying to avoid being manipulated by the mind. I mean, they spend hours or days at a time meditating. So I think that any Jedi with a strong enough will probably won't be affected by Psycho Mantis. And I think that if he tried to do that against a Sith, I think the Sith would just turn around and probably make Psycho Mantis go crazy and kill himself. So I don't really think that I think that his powers are too grounded to his own strength, as opposed to Jedi and Sith, where they gain their strength from the Force. And I think that's so much more powerful than what Psycho Mantis is working with. I think he has some limitations, but with the Jedi, pretty much the possibilities are endless. And the last question of the episode, or sorry, you got two more. Next question comes from Abil. You want to know, when I do collaboration videos, do I use Twitter or Skype to contact them? If I need to do some immediate contacting, I would use Twitter, but if I need to do some FaceTime, you obviously have to use Skype. And the last question of the episode comes from John Allen. You want to know, which video game would I like to see made into a television series? To be quite honest, I would love to see Metal Gear Solid turn into a television series, especially on Netflix. I wouldn't trust it on any network show because I think the budget would be too low. But I think 12 episodes, 45 minutes each on a Netflix budget, you could make a good Metal Gear Solid series. Even if it wanted to make some changes from the original continuity. I don't think Metal Gear could work as a movie, but I do think it could work as a Netflix series. So I would definitely pick Metal Gear. And with that, those are all the questions that you guys sent for this episode. Sorry if it got a little bit long, but I enjoy them. But if you like this video, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to comment on future videos. And if you have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, be sure to type in the comments down below. Remember to get them into me before next Wednesday before I start filming this. And like always, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.